The saxophone has three basic parts. There's the mouthpiece, there's the neck, and there's the body of the saxophone. The mouthpiece has two parts. It has a ligature, which holds the reed onto the mouthpiece, and the mouthpiece itself, which is usually made of plastic or hard rubber. The better ones are made of hard rubber. Sometimes they're made of other materials too, like wood or glass, but not usually. The one you have is probably hard rubber or plastic. Ligatures can look a lot of different ways too. The one I have here is a single screw Rovner brand ligature, but you can get ones that have two screws and are made of metal, or any of a number of different cool designs. They're all meant to hold the reed onto the mouthpiece. Of course, you need a reed too. I recommend starting with something like a 2 or a 2.5. And the reed is the part of the saxophone that's actually doing the vibrating to get the sound going. Here I have a reed. This is a number 3 reed, and the number refers to how thick the reed is at the tip, this outer part, and kind of how it's been cut. And a lower number makes it easier to play at first. Most professional saxophonists play on a 2.5 or a 3 or a 3.5, depending on what their mouthpiece is. It's really not about going to the highest reed strength you possibly can. It's really just about finding the reed strength that works for you, your embouchure, and the mouthpiece that you have. The only rule is, does it sound good? Be really gentle when you're getting your reeds out. This one comes in a plastic case, and I want to take it out gently. You're going to need to soak your reed before you play, and you can do this in water, or you can do it in your mouth. I do it in my mouth. So I put half the reed, the cut part of the reed, into my mouth to soak for a minute. That's really all it takes. You're just trying to get it to a basic humidity level so it'll vibrate more easily, and you want the fibers of the reed to be equally moist so that there isn't any warping. If you look at it on end, it should be relatively flat. If it isn't flat, if it's a little warpy, don't throw the reed out. Just hold it on the table of the mouthpiece. That's this flat part here. Hold it on the table of the mouthpiece and kind of press on it a little bit. But remember, you always want to be really careful with the tip of the reed, that thin part, that paper thin part, because that's what's generating your sound. One of the most common problems I see is that people have reeds that are chipped in the end, or that they didn't take the time to soak and make sure they were flat, so they're warped. So watch out for that. Once the reed is soaked, I also moisten the back part of the reed that's actually going to touch the mouthpiece. I don't soak it, I just moisten it a little bit. So soaking, moistening. You can stick it in your mouth for just a second like that. You can lick it, whatever it takes to get a little bit of moisture on this part of the reed. Might seem kind of gross at first, but it really helps the reed seal to the mouthpiece. That's key. You want the reed to seal to the mouthpiece. There can't be any air leaking out places you don't want it to leak out, because it'll make it really hard to play and the reed won't vibrate like it's supposed to. So with the reed soaked and then moistened, you want to place it on the table of the mouthpiece, flat to flat, so that the bark of the cane is out and the cut part is out. What you're going for here is to get the tip of the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece to be more or less even with each other, and the reed even side to side, so it's not tilted one way or the other on the mouthpiece. So when I put the reed on the mouthpiece, after it's been soaked and then moistened, I put it on the table of the mouthpiece, and I look at it, try and look at it at eye level, and see if I can get the reed and the mouthpiece lined up evenly. And the other thing that I do is I actually see if there's just a little bit of a sliver of black over the top of it. Some people say you should make it perfectly even. Some people say have the reed a little higher. Some people say have the reed a little lower. You can experiment and find out what works for you, because more likely than not, a little higher or a little lower will work for you. Plus, part of it has to do with the reed strength of this particular reed. This one says 3, but a 3 and another 3 that I pull out of the same box are going to be slightly different, because we're talking about an organic material here. It's not 100% precise. So moving it up or down can actually make the reed feel a little softer or a little harder to play, which might be what you need. So I'd encourage you to experiment moving it up or down. Once the reed is about where you want it, I put the ligature on. I slide the ligature on like that, And then I double check the reed to make sure it's exactly where I want it before I tighten it. This one tightens with the single screw on top, and I do it moderately firm, but not really, really tight. If you're using a metal ligature, you slide it over the top. And most are designed to have the screws against the reed. But you might want to look into yours and see, is it supposed to have the screws above on top of the mouthpiece, or are the screws against the reed? This kind has the screws against the reed, and I can adjust it here. I try and make sure, whatever ligature I'm using, that it's below the cut part of the reed. Again, you can experiment, a little higher, a little lower. The reed will probably respond differently, and little adjustments like that give you flexibility. There isn't a right or wrong way to assemble the saxophone. I tend to start with my neck strap so that I have something to clip into as I assemble my instrument, and I don't feel like I'm going to drop it. Your neck strap should have some way of adjusting and some way of clipping into your saxophone. Could be plastic, could be metal. I prefer the metal one because I feel like they're less likely to break, and I'm probably not going to drop my saxophone. Put the neck strap over your head, and then you pick up your horn. So put the neck on first. Make sure this screw is loosened, and then you can slide the tenon part of the neck in. A little twisting motion side to side will help it get in all the way. You want it to ultimately be tight. So if it's too sticky to get in at first, try making sure you're twisting, or wipe the tenon joint clean first, and then you can get it in all the way. And don't forget to tighten this screw. You want to line up the octave key mechanism that sticks up from the body of the saxophone with the brace on the neck. You can adjust it a little to the right or left later, but that's a great starting point. Next, I usually clip in, but I still have a rule about the saxophone. Even with the neck strap on, I keep one hand on my saxophone all the time. That way, if the neck strap breaks for some reason, or something happens, I have one hand on the saxophone to catch it. Then you want to make sure that the cork is greased. I have some cork grease here. I'm going to put it on just like chapstick on my lips. I'm going to use a little up and down motion here. Don't get too much on, it'll be gooey and gross. You won't like it. If the cork's really dry, you want to put it on every time. New saxophones and rental saxophones often have really bone dry cork, and you might have to put a little bit more on those. Once it gets lubricated every day for a while, it'll kind of soak in some of the grease, and you won't have to put as much on, and you might even get away with not putting it on every single time. Then it's time to put the mouthpiece on. Again, a twisting motion is going to help it get on. Line it up and twist it on. The reed should be facing down. I always laugh when I see pictures of saxophonists with the reed facing up, because that's not how you play. Now you're more or less ready to go. There are 3 places to adjust the saxophone. The first one is you can adjust the neck strap, and this makes it so the saxophone will come to you. Too low, and I'd have to bend over all funny to get the saxophone to come to me. Too high, and the saxophone will feel like it's going to hit me in the face, and I'm leaning back, or maybe it hits me on the upper lip here. So use the neck strap to adjust to get the right height to where the saxophone is pretty much coming to you. Then the second place you can adjust the saxophone is the neck, and this is where you can get just the right angle. I'm loosening the screw, I'm tilting the mouthpiece to the right or left to get it pointed towards my mouth, and then I tighten the screw back up. On the alto, when I play it standing up, I do have the octave key just about dead on with the brace. That works for me, but you can decide what works for you. And then lastly, you have the twist of the mouthpiece, and this will enable you to get your head so it's level when you play and not bending one way or the other. So I'm going to adjust those 3 parts now and get the saxophone to come right to me. I'm standing up nice and tall with my spine extended but not stressed. Adjust the neck strap to get the saxophone to come to my mouth. Loosen the neck, adjust the angle just slightly so it feels like it's coming right towards me. And then I adjust the tilt of the mouthpiece so that the mouthpiece will come into my mouth. Now I'm ready to play. Thanks for watching. I hope that's a helpful introduction to the saxophone.